Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Many of you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a Wandering Scribe alumni. Now, you remember this incredible author being part of my first ever Authors Roundtable two-part special. And I'm so excited to have her back on the show, this time in her own solo author interview. Now, she is a sorry, a former journalist and a current YA author, and she has self-published Mike in the Middle and All in Your Head, and currently lives in Alabama. And I'm so excited to have her back on the show to talk about all of her books and her journey and what she has planned for us in the future. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a huge round of applause to a returning guest, author Gaby Knight. Gabby, welcome back.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So excited to have you back here on the show, Gabby. So excited to have you back. And before we actually dive into this author interview, I'm very curious. Is there a random fact about you that not a lot of people may know about?
The one coming to my mind is I have a cow named after me in Indiana. Well, had. I don't know if she's still alive, but
Wait, really? You had a cow named after you?
yeah, so do you want to hear the whole story?
Oh, yes. You got me intrigued now.
Okay, so my college roommate, she was a nursing major, but her parents inherited a cattle farm and they had a calf born on my 21st birthday. And so she asked me, like, oh, can we name this cow after you? And I was like, yes, heck yes. And my one regret that I think about sometimes is that my roommate, we lived like 3 hours away from her hometown. And like once a quarter, she would go back to her house and she'd invite me. But I always wanted to like stay back at St. Mary's just because it was like, oh, the whole dorm to myself, you know? And it's like,
Right.
no, I should have gone and met Gabby the cow. Anyway.
All right. Nice. Very, very nice. Now, since this is your first ever solo author interview, as a little teaser, can you give us a little summary of your two books? Because from our previous episodes that you were in the collaboration, those have been like your biggest ones. Like you love telling people about these two incredible books.
Yeah. So my YA debut novel is Mike in the Middle. It is about two best friends who make a pact that the one thing that will ruin their friendship is if one of them dates a guy better suited for the other. Enter Mike. And then my newest novel that I published last year is my murder mystery, All in Your Head. It's about psychic detective and seventh grader Cass questioning her precog abilities after she finds a body in the woods.
Ooh, I like it. I also like the covers too, Gabby. They are
Thank you.
really, really good. And we're actually going to talk about that when we get to the marketing side in terms about, collaborating and building the book. But let's go back to the very, very beginning at your origin story. So from your bio, you were a former journalist before you became a writer. But I'm very curious, even before that, what would you consider to be your aha moment, your canon event, so to speak, that got you invested in writing?
I don't know if I necessarily have a big event. I mean, the first thing I can think of where it was like, okay, I'm going to start publishing or publishing for fun was my sister and I used to write crack Harry Potter fan fiction when I was in high school and she was in college. She's like 2 years older than me. And so for about 2 years, like once a week, we'd meet on a Zoom call, we'd catch up and then we'd be like, yeah. And then they canceled the Quidditch season and replaced it with like inter-house dance-offs,
Ooh.
and like we giggle about that. I think what really got it for me, I mean, I've always been a creative person. Like I used to want to be a cartoonist. Like I love drawing and, I liked art and I liked singing. But definitely what really focused me in was wanting to be a journalist. When I was in high school, I remember I would just watch a bunch of like ESPN or the ESPN news, just a lot of like sports channels during the summer when I was bored. And so I wanted to be a sports reporter. And then when I went into college to go be a sports reporter, I majored in communication studies. And doing my summer internship at a local news station, I didn't realize there was sports interns. I just went with hard news, and I really liked that. Like I felt like I found my calling there. And then, I mean, for me personally, I didn't care if I was going to be like a print reporter or a TV reporter. I applied for both jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one I got was for a print job in Georgia. And so that's kind of really where I loved writing. I loved meeting people. I loved writing feature stories. That it then kind of hit me. Like I remember just buying a little notebook and like writing, oh, story ideas if I ever make a novel one day. Just because I thought it'd be fun to like write something like that. So.
Awesome. And then, as you mentioned before, Mike in the Middle was your debut book that started your writing career, followed by All in Your Head. So let's start with Mike in the Middle. Now, as you were developing that story, ultimately, what was the plan you had for that book initially? Did it take on an entirely different form in like the pre-writing phase, or did you know from the get-go that this was a story that you want to write?
So I remember, so I should probably go back a bit. It's a little bit based on my college friends who went through something similar. And I remember at the time in college being like, oh, this could be like a soap opera or a TV show or a movie. And then like I remember like taking a break, like running on like maybe not a treadmill or an elliptical or something, like trying to work out, being like, clearing my head as an adult. And being like, if I wrote a book for NaNoWriMo, what could I write? And then like that story idea popped in my head and I was like, oh, I could write this. I could make this like a 50,000 word novel easily.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, this is actually something that one of my followers wanted to know. I get a lot of fan questions sent to me through my website. One of my followers would like to know, what drew you to the YA genre as opposed to the regular adult fiction, or as we mentioned in our previous collaboration episode, the new adult genre?
Right. I just love young adult. I think that's the thing. I feel like internally, I'm just 31 going on 13. And I think there's like a lot of wisdom and there's a lot of good writing in young adults. Like, one of my favorite authors is John Green, and like he primarily writes young adults,
Ooh,
so.
nice. Very, very nice. All right. Now, going back to Mike in the Middle, once you were, developing that story, planning it out, incoming cat,
Sorry.
all good,
There
all
we go.
good. Once you were developing that story, writing it out, and deciding, the characters, the story arcs, and the sub stories in between the main narrative, ultimately, what was the goal you had for yourself as the author for your debut book? And what was a promise you're making, not just to yourself as the author, but to fans of the genre?
Well, my goal itself was to finish it. I feel like I wasn't trying to do anything specifically. It was just for me to challenge myself to see, like, one, could I write a novel? Two, could I like really fictionalize this, put it in high school, translate all this stuff? Um, and so, and then what was it you asked? I'm sorry.
Of course, of course. Um, Besides, the promise you're making to yourself as the author, what is always the promise you're making to readers of the genre as well?
I think the promise I made was just to write, I wanted to write something different. Like I wanted to write a different ending than what you'd expect. And I wanted readers to know that it's okay with how it ends. Trying to avoid spoilers here. So.
Absolutely. Completely understand. Completely understand. Now, here's another fan question. Are you a pantser or planner? I think you've answered this in the collaboration episode.
I'm a good half and half. Like I will start a novel and I will be like, okay, this is where I should go. With Mike in the Middle itself, again, I kind of based on my friends, so it's pretty much like, oh, I know what I'm doing, until I got to one point and went, okay, now I actually need to plan. But with All in Your Head, I remember using Dan Harmon's story circle, where Dan Harmon charted out, I think it's the hero's journey specifically, like the 8 parts for like your beats for a story. And you can see it in episodes of Community and Rick and Morty. So I went, okay, I wonder if I can do that with All in Your Head. So then I did that. And so when I write stories, like, yeah, I generally, like, I write a general outline, but I'm not like, and in chapter 1, they do this, and in chapter 2, they do that, And again, there are moments where, like, I get to a point, I'm like, look, I plotted it out, and I'm like, I have 40,000 words to still type, and I should probably plot here. It's like I'm a good mixture.
Same, absolutely same here. Now I actually go into a set of fan questions that I've gathered over the years from a lot of people who have commented on my videos and those who have, messaged me privately on my website. One of my fan questions that I keep getting a lot is in regards to characters in stories. And this question asks, how did you make the characters? And this is also in Mike in the Middle and All in Your Head. How did you write the characters to feel authentic and believable, that it makes sense for them to exist in their respective stories? Because I'm sure you can also agree, as a fellow author as well as a fellow reader, there are some characters that feel like real people, but then there are characters that are simply the archetype, the trait character. They don't have a personality, they're just there for the plot.
I definitely think for me, characters are one of the things that come first. Like, I get a story idea where I'm like, oh, here's a plot idea, and then I'm like, who would do this? So for All in Your Head specifically, I remember originally, again, this might be a little spoilery, so if you don't want spoilers, maybe, I don't know, put a timestamp up for people. But for All in Your Head, I remember having this idea that there would be one person who could see monsters, and they would tell their best friend, and their best friend believed them, but then it turned out to just be anxiety. And then I was like, that sounds a little bit like Don Quixote, or he sees the windmills as dragons, and then Sancho or Pancho like falls into it. So then I was like, okay, what if it's someone who thinks they're psychic and they're having these psychic visions, but it's just anxiety? And then I said to myself, who would believe that? And then immediately came up in my head was middle school girls. So that's where then I developed Cass and Lenore as characters to set in like a world where, you're still like that awkward tween phase, which like, you're not really a kid anymore, but you're not an adult, but you still want to hold on to that childhood innocence. That's where it's like, okay, yeah, they're like the two weirdos in their class who are best friends. But they don't tell anyone that like Cass is going to be psychic because they don't want her to like get picked on or to like have the government come and steal her and like test on her,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a follow-up to that, and this is a little tough one, as the author, between your two books, who's your favorite character and which character caused you the most strain? And I mean in the sense of the most difficult to flesh out.
Ooh. Well, I just want to say it feels rude having to pick a favorite child.
Yes.
It feels very rude, whoever came up with that question. And then I'm also very sorry that I know the answer, which is Lenore Hurley. She was very fun to write because she was, again, one of those, when you're in middle school, especially as a girl, you're expected like to want to fit in, and there's a lot of cliques and there's a lot of like pressure, and like a lot of your friends, might have been like, oh, I loved all these weird things in 5th grade, but then you go to 6th grade and suddenly they don't care anymore. They just want to be cool. And there's a lot of pressure, and so I'm not trying to like downgrade anyone, but so what I loved about Lenore is that she was like, nope, I'm still my weird self. Her real name is Eleanor, but she likes to go by Lenore because her uncle recited The Raven to her once. And she loves mysteries, and she can't pick a name for a cat, and she still loves climbing trees. Like Lenore is very much like an unfiltered part of my brain when I wrote All in Your Head. So there was something very fun there, and like not having to hold back when writing dialogue with her. Now, I think the character I had the hardest time maybe fleshing out would be Rachel from Mike in the Middle, because Rachel is an only child. She comes from a place of privilege. She has like, she also doesn't fit in quite like Lenore, but she cares, unlike Lenore, that she doesn't fit in. And again, she's raised by two parents, not a lot of friends. So it was like trying to write this character who's a little aloof. And then trying to make her not, when I wrote this book, I was worried I was making her come across as a bee the whole time. So I was like, I would ask people, I was like, she doesn't come across awful, right? Like, do you like her? Is she likable? And thankfully I got resounding yeses to that. But there was parts where I'd be writing it and rewriting it and being like, oh my gosh, like Rachel looks awful.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I've had a few rewrite for characters myself, especially my character in my most recent book, Decimus, who is, not only a soldier, but he's a single father who is struggling in a way with an addiction problem, and writing that character to be believable in the sense. And I
Right.
based him off of, the character Benjamin Martin from the Patriot film, but added my own flair to it. And not gonna lie, it was not easy. And then followed by writing the son, who was Justinian. And this is probably something we're going to touch on a little bit later when we get to, what does it mean to write in the YA genre. But I struggled with writing Justinian because his character was 10 years old, and yet I had him speaking like he was 15 or 20. It's like,
Right. It's like, how do I write children?
yes,
Yeah.
it's not easy. It's not like an easy thing to do. And one of my readers said, like, Justinian is a great character, but I was under the impression he was 15. By your timeline, he's only 10. It does not make sense for him to speak this fluently or, eloquently as a
Yeah.
10-year-old. So I had to do a whole rewrite of him and the love interest in that book, which was not easy. And this is also an interesting fan question because this is a very new one that I've gotten, and I may actually be using this for my other author interviews. But this fan question asks, if you were to write Mike in the Middle now, at this point in time in your life, would it be the same book as you wrote it in the past, or would it be entirely different?
I think the general vibe of the plot would be same, but it would definitely just be different from how much I've grown as a writer. And just how much you learn from writing, like with other writers, could use more beta readers, I think. What I mean? Like, it wouldn't be like word for word exact, but it probably would still be the plot of, oh, two best friends make a pact that, they'll end their friendship if both of them like the same guy. But like the words might be a little bit different. Maybe there'd be more, I don't know. It's very speculative. So
Yes,
I feel like
very.
that's the best I can give.
No, that's fair. That is very, very
Okay.
fair. Now, let's jump forward in time a little bit. So, from Mike in the Middle to All in Your Head, how did that story come about? And how did you want it to be different from your writing approach to Mike in the Middle? Because it's still your voice as the author, but again, it's entirely different. It's like a murder mystery, it's an entirely different subgenre.
Right. So I love murder mysteries. And I always say like, oh, these child books got me into reading as a child, but what got me into classic literature and like reading for adults was reading Sherlock Holmes when I was 14.
Mm.
And so like I've always wanted to write a mystery, or I've been fascinated when I'd watch like episodes of House, and I'm like, how did they plan out, like mystery movies and mystery shows like that? You know what I mean? Where you go back, do you go like backwards? Do you go forwards? Are you like pantsing when you write murder mysteries? So the year was 2020. I was unemployed and, locked in my house with everyone. I was trying to, again, challenge myself writing wise. And, I heard for plenty of years, Dan Harmon's story circle. So again, I was trying to do the story circle. And then I was like, oh, I could use this story about, the girl who sees things, but it's something else. And so I made sure to plot about it right before NaNoWriMo 2020. And then basically went out and then just tried to carry that out.
Absolutely.
So
Now, ultimately, looking back on, your journey as an author so far, this is another question, but this one's kind of a more personal question. Now, a lot of authors that I've had on the show, Gabby, they've been very, I don't want to say secretive, but they're very hesitant to, share with family and friends that they have embarked on this new journey. I've even had some authors say that they've never told their friends or family that they are, an author, because to say that you're an author, it gets a very mixed reaction, especially if you tell them what kind of author. If you tell them that you are a published author with a well-known publishing house, you get one reaction. But if you say that you are an indie author or hybrid author, normally, the reaction is very positive. But you do have those instances where people argue that you're not really a true author because you are self-published or hybrid, which is just absolutely bogus. But those opinions still exist. And there has been that hesitancy to share with family and friends because conceptually, a lot of people believe that they are not authors, despite the fact that they may have written, numerous books, but have only published two from their collection. So for you, Gabby, when did you feel confident in yourself to say that, you know what, I am an author, I am a creative individual, I have made these two incredible works, and then told friends and family that you are embarking on this new journey?
Um, to be honest, I've never really had that negative reaction from people telling them I'm an indie author.
Well, that's
And
good.
I never really worried about that, you know. Maybe it's just because, again, I was a journalist. I'm like, I'm already writing, I'm already typing like 1,000 words a day. And so, I definitely thought going in that I'd want to be trad published. But then when I just was like, no, I want to publish this myself, then I was like, okay, yeah, let's go indie routes. But funnily enough, my family is incredibly supportive. My folks are back in Michigan. I live in Alabama. And when I went to the family Christmas party last year, like all of my uncles and aunts were like, oh, hey, published author. Oh, how's our author doing? And like my cousins I hadn't seen in a while, they're like, yeah, so you publish books? Like no one was giving me flack, which is crazy. Well, also, I
Well,
didn't
that's
expect them
good.
to bring up me publishing books. So that was very touching, so to speak. But I guess my response to that is like, I know who I am. And my worth isn't based on someone else's opinion. And my work isn't, again, based on someone's opinion, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. 100%. I like that. Absolutely do. Now, generally speaking, what have been the reviews been like for Mike the Middle and All in Your Head? Have they been positive, very critical, or 50-50? Or are you one of those authors that does not look at your reviews? Because I've had a lot of those authors on the show too.
Um, Generally speaking, I get a lot of positive reviews. And it seems like if people leave 3 stars, they don't really explain why. I had someone like get my book on KU, Mike in the Middle, and then it looked like they DNF'd a few pages in, so I got 2 cents, and then they left a 1 star review. And for me, there, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna read it, just because I know for me that I will obsess and think about this 1 star review forever and ever, even if it just said, I don't like this book, and I like puppy mills, and I love kicking children on the weekends. Like it would still like be rent free in my mind. So
Wow. Okay. All right. And you
yeah.
brought up the notion of KU, which is something that I've actually gotten a lot of questions on from a lot of guests about, what exactly does KU do for authors? Because, Kindle and Amazon are like probably one of the biggest platforms for us indie authors. So I'm going to save that before we get to the business side of being
Okay.
an indie author. So now we're going to shift and actually look at some reflective questions that focus on what does it mean to be an indie author in the digital age, because the industry has definitely changed. And I'm sure you definitely agree, Gabby, as a journalist, you probably may have seen this trend, a while and seeing it, hearing it, all that stuff. In the sense of, we look back like maybe 20 years or so, being an indie author was seen as, not professional or a lesser form of publication. But we fast forward now, we can't say that anymore because you
Yeah.
can't go into a Barnes and Noble or an indie bookstore and say which book is self-published and which book is traditionally published, because the quality and the expectations has gotten so very good. And of course, with the rise of social media and the internet, that's also played a powerful role in the rise of indie authors and indie creatives altogether. And it's a double-edged sword. I think you can definitely agree that social media can be a boon, but it can also be a very negative thing. It could be very deflating. It could highlight or heighten our imposter syndrome and writer's block, and ultimately make us lose the passion for writing. I've actually had a lot of people on the show who have said that at one point in time or another, they did not want to be a writer because they did not enjoy it anymore, which is something that I think we talked about in the collaboration episode, that you have to be passionate about this industry, you have to be passionate about the craft. So ultimately, Gabby, in your opinion, as a fellow indie author, what has disciplined you to stay creative and still be invested in the craft in an industry that is always teeter-tottering between human-driven content and artificially created materials that are being pumped out on a rapid speed, which is something that we'll also be touching on too.
Gosh, that was a huge question. I definitely just say limiting my time on social media or just trying to be cognizant when I'm on social media. Because again, like stuff you see just isn't real. You know what I mean? Like social media, everything is a presentation. Um, yes, Kitty. But sorry. Yeah, I'd just say definitely limit your social media time because yeah, you're either going to be seeing AI crap or you're going to be seeing like people going, "Oh, look, I'm writing a book," and then like they'll bring in all these followers and everything, but then they still won't be like agented months later, right? Or they still won't be publishing for years later. Um, and then in the same vein along with that too is just like don't compare yourself to others. You know what I mean? You're on your own journey, you know?
Absolutely, 100%. And let's talk about probably the two biggest things that, you know, do affect authors, and that is, of course, writer's block and imposter syndrome. Now, I've had a lot of authors that have said they've never encountered writer's block, but a lot of authors have had those days of imposter syndrome, especially when it comes to, writing their books or people making comparisons. And again, social media does heighten this and highlight this. So I'm wondering for you, Gabby, as you were possibly, after publishing Mike in the middle and then slowly writing the ideas for All in Your Head, did you ever have those subtle moments of imposter syndrome?
Hold on, let me readjust myself. Alrighty, so sorry, what was the question again?
Of course, of course. So the question was, have you ever had those moments of, like imposter syndrome and specifically from that, transition period from, after you published, Mike in the middle and then writing the outline and the idea for All in Your Head?
Yeah, so how I actually did it was I wrote Mike in the Middle in 2019, and then I wrote All in Your Head in 2020. And then I didn't actually get to publish Mike in the Middle till 2024. And then,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and then I published All in Your Head in 2025. So I don't know if I felt imposter syndrome really with Mike in the Middle or All in Your Head. I think I felt nerves right before All in Your Head was published, where I was like, this is really bad. What if everyone hates it? What if everyone can see who the murderer is like from a mile away, Um, but then again, it's the reassurance of family and friends who are like, no, I couldn't tell. No, it wasn't hard to figure it out. I think my biggest imposter syndrome might be with the current book I'm writing right now, which is an adult romance. Because it's like I'm
Mm,
reading so many romances right now, and it's like I can never, it gets into your head where I'm like, I'm reading a beautiful Emily Henry book, and then I'm like, I can never write like Emily Henry. She's so amazing. Or, I'll read an Abby Jimenez book where she has like dual POVs between like the female main character and the male main character. And I'm like, this is amazing. I don't know how she can write men yearning like this. How does she write men? you know?
right.
But again, you have to remind yourself too. It's like it's one day at a time. This might be your first novel in a genre. Like it's okay to have messy drafts.
Absolutely, 100%. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is, of course, the rise of AI driven books and AI written content, which has plagued the industry now more than ever. And it's crazy to think of how far AI has gotten in the last few years. I mean, if we look at, the evolution of AI with like the Will Smith spaghetti
Yeah,
videos, that's like a history in of itself, like how far AI
yeah,
has gotten. It's absolutely crazy and insane. And I've also argued that, during the lockdown, during the quarantine years, that led to the increase of indie authors, but also led to the innovations for, AI and AI driven content. And as we've seen very recently in the news of companies allowing AI written books in stores, that kind of defeats the purpose of, what does it mean to be a writer and have those, human emotions and everything. And some people even going forward and saying, like, if you want to have AI written books, that's fine. But don't say it's by an author, like by so and so. People are now pushing, if you're going to have AI driven books, have on the title instead programmed by
Yeah.
so and so, because you did not write it, you put it into a program and it will generate a story for you, which ultimately, AI in of itself is going to be here. We can't get rid of it no matter what. And I think what people can agree, at least I hope they will agree, is that AI can be used as a tool if you use it correctly. Because to say you're against AI is, impossible to say, because spell check and everything like that, that's AI. But generative AI, creating
Yeah.
something out of a prompt or out of nothing, that is something people have issues with. So ultimately, Gabby, I would like to hear your thoughts on this discussion. And also, if your book or anyone you know in your inner circle of authors and friends have been unfortunately flagged by the AI witch hunt of their work having AI, or their covers been used with AI because it's getting out of control.
Thankfully, myself and no one I've known has been accused of AI. Thank goodness. And if people do accuse me, I can just find the typos in my own books to point out to them that I've accidentally published. But yeah, no, I am against AI. I think it's really sad because, again, there is a legitimate database. I think it's by the Atlantic that has like all the books that have been just taken to use for these Gen AI creators, to make their own books. Or it's almost funny and it's sad too, because I've seen like YouTube videos where it's like, oh, there've been a trad published book where they clearly like wrote in an AI prompt and like it would say at like the end of a paragraph, do you want me to write more about this romance?
Mm,
Um, you know, and it's definitely just like really frustrating to having the AI talk with other people where, yeah, it's like, yeah, we have spell check. Yeah, I have Siri set timers for me and alarms, but that's not the same as like telling it to, write about two best friends who make a pact, or, to write about psychic detectives. Like, it's not going to come out. I don't want to say it won't come out good, but it will just come out soulless because it doesn't have someone like, sitting there writing and rewriting and, someone with intent and thought and put into it.
absolutely. Well said, Gabby. Well said. So now we're going to shift over and talk about my favorite segment, and that's, of course, the business side of being an author. So let's start with the icebreaker question. Now, looking at, as you mentioned before, Mike in the Middle and All in Your Head were published, not too long ago. When it came to marketing your books and promoting it, and again, you kind of touched on this before in the collaboration episode, link in the description and the tag right here, viewers and listeners. What really surprised you about that aspect of the journey? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of promotion?
Yeah, definitely something I would have thought of doing is doing ARC readers for Mike in the Middle. Like I know like I specifically joined Instagram to hit the YA audience, young adults. I didn't want to do TikTok personally because I just don't feel comfortable using TikTok. But yeah, like I wish because yeah, so to going back, like you mentioned too, I did mention this the last time, which is I wish I would have started earlier with my Instagram account, like been posting and hyping up Mike in the Middle, and then doing advanced reader copies, getting that out there so I could get more people invested in it. And so it wasn't like I had 100 followers by the time I, had publishing day. So
Absolutely, 100%. And again, I think this question I kind of asked in the collaboration episode, but I'm wondering if you can go a little bit more in depth on it. And that is, writing for your audience and, writing for the market. Because sometimes it's a hit or miss depending on, what's popular nowadays and what's trending. And looking at your book covers, they honestly remind me of that new show that's on Prime right now, like the hockey romance story.
Hated rivalry.
Yes, it does. I actually had a chance to look at the cover from the book that it's based on, and seeing yours, I definitely get that feel. And I think a lot of people are probably going to get that as well. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but it definitely has that, that pull, and it pulls readers in because of that familiarity. So as you were writing and designing the covers for your books, how did you balance your individuality as the author in terms of, making the cover of the book that was going to pull people in, but also writing for the market and the audience and taking into account, okay, what do all YA books have? What is something that's going to pull
Yeah.
them in? So how did you balance that?
Right. So what I did, I didn't make these myself. I hired a cover editor. Shout out Julia Horowitz. She's absolutely amazing. She's on Fiverr. But yeah, what I did was I built Pinterest boards for both of my books to be like this one was like middle grade mystery. This one was like YA cover books where I would pin like similar book covers that I liked, like I researched the market of like I'd go to the library or I just search into Pinterest, like, YA book covers, and I'd save all the ones I liked basically. And then that way I showed it to my cover artist, Julia, and then she gave me 3 design options to pick from that she designed herself and she drew. And then she like really fleshed them out until they became, these beautiful babies.
Nice.
But so yeah, so you gotta know, like lean into your market or know your market. And again, start looking into that.
Yes.
My
Now
answer.
let's talk a little bit about cover artists as well. And this is something that a lot of people have been really wanting to hear on, when working with, cover artists and balancing a budget. Because the artists, cover artists who make like book covers or anything like that, they are absolutely incredible. And again, we mentioned before, balancing out the budget as an indie author is, it's always there. We can't get rid of it because we always have to manage our finances. But also beyond like the financial side, it is, apologies, dog. It is always good to work with a fellow creative, but it is also important to really look at the artist's style of, art and seeing if it's going to match the story, because you want it to match.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, Gabby, did you have to go through a process of other authors or maybe a list to find this cover artist, or was this the artist like right from the get-go for you?
Right. So I went on Fiverr. I looked up YA cover artists, and I compared a lot, and I looked at different styles too. Again, going off my Pinterest board and doing that. And then like she was probably one of the first people I contacted about Mike in the Middle, and she gave like I paid for like again her preliminary designs, design concepts like between the 3 of them, and I was like, okay, these are good. Like I want to go with her.
Nice, nice. Now, let's kind of talk about something that I don't think it's touched on a lot when it comes to marketing our books, and that is, of course, posts and social media, which I think, again, you touched on this a lot, and a lot of the other authors touched on this as well, because, again, we're not marketers. We don't know what the algorithm is going to like. And I think the viewers would definitely like to hear further explanation on, if you are an indie author and you want to market your book, these are the posts you should be pushing out there as opposed to these posts. Can you share your own experiences and your thoughts on this?
All right. Well, definitely, it's good to announce your book. And they say like maybe only make an advertisement every 3 posts, or else it's going to get exhausting if you're just posting the same thing over. That's like, buy my book, buy my book. My book is available on Amazon, buy my book. You're going to want to post where you like introduce your characters, introduce the plot. People on Instagram love tropes. And that's been the hardest thing with my books, is being like, what tropes do I have? Talk about what inspired you to write. People love looking just into the authors themselves. So like, don't be afraid to share yourself in your posts as well. Like those typically tend to do well. And then I'd say if there's like a trending post going on, don't be afraid to join it. Like, trending type of post. Because again, people love, and the algo loves trends. So,
Yes, very true. And this is another, actually, an original fan question that I've gotten earlier this week. Have you ever done a giveaway for your books? And if so, what did you learn from it?
so pretty much what I learned from them is, I mean, it just really depends. Just so definitely when you do a giveaway post, I like to usually include the tropes because that attracts people. And you want to add music as well because again, people like again, it attracts people the more you like put into the giveaway. Again, don't expect people to immediately read your book or immediately like give it 5 stars, you know what I mean? Because people are readers, they have TBRs. Um, and then another thing too is as a US author, this didn't impact me until Orange Man won re-election and tariffs like went up in price. So like you have to learn to like how much you want to open up internationally to versus US versus like the format of books. Because if I open an international like giveaway, my giveaway winners are gonna get ebook copies. Because I'm sorry, tariffs are expensive. So
That is true. That
yeah.
is, very, very true. And kind of in the same thing, I've seen a lot, and maybe you can add your own thoughts into this. Do you have a comment, or what is your comment on, some posts that say, if I get, 200 or 300 in sales and like 300 plus followers, like those kind of posts, does that kind of do a little harm to the authors, I don't say credibility, but the overall purpose?
You know, I've never done that personally, and I've been a little confused by those as well. Like, typically, I will just do giveaways to celebrate my wins. Like, I'm doing one right now because I just got all on your head stickers and bookmarks, you know? Um, but for me, those ones are interesting. Or the ones that confuse me are the ones where they're like, oh, what is it? It's like a raffle, and they're like, oh, first place gives to second place, who gives to third place. Like, I don't get those.
Yeah, that
Sorry.
that is. And that's the thing when it comes to us authors. We're always trying to experiment, see what works, see what doesn't. And, ultimately, once we find the winning combination, we're going to stick with that, depending on the genre and the book, because it may not always work for everybody. And speaking of books, I think you kind of mentioned this earlier, but I was wondering if you can share with us some of the books that may have inspired you growing up or may have played a role in your writing style. And bonus, if you could also name the authors.
Oh, that's a really good question. So authors that kind of have also inspired me are Ernest Hemingway and Mitch Albom in that they were also former journalists who wrote novels. And so they just have that AP style. Like when I read, what's it called? Farewell to Arms or The Old Man and the Sea or Five People You Meet in Heaven. There's just something where my brain's like, I'm just vibing with this. Like this works really well. Um, in terms of, I guess, YA authors I really love reading, I really love John Green. I really love Nicola Yoon to help inspire with that. On the mystery side of my brain, again, Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle killed it there. Um, also kind of, I want to say literally, but kind of not literally with all the murder mysteries. Um, Agatha Christie, of course, and then the inventor of detective fiction himself, Edgar Allan Poe. So
Nice. Very, very nice. And kind of still talking about authors, are there any authors that you have met in your career that you'd like to give a shout out to who have helped you along the way?
ooh. So I've pretty much met mostly indie authors, but one I definitely really liked, she was a romance author who published, she was a romance author who was under, I think, Harlequin, but she decided to indie publish her own like thriller novel called Cold Waters. Her name is Debbie Herbert. She lives down in Wetumpka area. And I remember her just being very like lovely to talk to. Like I did a story interview on her and like she signed me a copy and she told me to keep writing. And so I think she's someone I'd like to shout out. So.
Nice. That's awesome. That's awesome, Gabby. Now we're almost near the end of this incredible interview. I have a few last questions left. And this one I haven't really asked a lot of authors in a while, but I'm wondering if I can hear your thoughts on it. And that is, of course, the expectations of authors doing their first tabling experience. And I think we can all agree that going to conventions, going to events is, you know, probably a gold mine if you can find the right event. But there are unfortunately some harsh realities and truths I do need to talk about. And probably the biggest one is there is no guarantee you're going to make your money back at
Yeah.
those conventions. You are not going to make as much. I can say that, wholeheartedly. I did not actually pay for my booth. I was actually part of a booth, but I did spend a lot on books. I think I spent about maybe like close to $400 in books. And I think I like got 15 of each, which I still have to this day. Maybe like almost close to $200 in sales. But it's not so much there to sell books as it is there to get exposure, which I think at the end of the day, that's how conventions should be. And also, even beyond, Comic Cons or book festivals, there's also small pop up events as well. So ultimately, Gabby, I would like to hear your own thoughts on it. And if you've done tabling, can you share your own experiences of it? And is there anything you would do differently going forward?
Yeah, so I've done quite a few tablings, and I've done things too where I'll just go out and it's like, oh, you can sell things from your trunk, and I've sold copies of Mike in the Middle. And the thing is, you love your book, you think it's amazing, maybe you want it to win a Pulitzer Prize or another big award. But the truth of the matter is, you are not known. A lot of people don't know you. And a lot of people, they might only have the budget for one or two books, and so they might not buy it, even if it's absolutely amazing. And so you're gonna have to be okay with that. And like you said too, it's about getting your name out there when you go to these things. Like generally speaking, for me, it might be a little silly, it might be a little sad, but my general goal is to sell one book an hour. And if I can do that per convention, so if it's like a 5 hour con, like I just want to sell 5 books. Or if it's like an 8 hour day, I want to sell 8 books. Or it's a 2 hour event, I want to sell 2 books. Like that is pretty much my mark of success for me. Because you have to remember too, there's not a lot, like there's so many things distracting people in this world today, like video games, YouTube, TikTok. There's just not as many readers, and we're about to see a literacy crisis, I think, in the US.
Yes.
So you have to like keep your expectations a little low. It's not the same as like, in the 60s where, Harper Lee sold like millions of copies of To Kill a Mockingbird. As amazing as that is. Because you have to remember too, you're also indie published. And so the way you work around in the indie world too is you build your community. And like you said, this is good exposure. This is a good way to meet people. So definitely my advice is to get your business cards made, have a link tree, have social media on it, because I've met so many people and I think I've given out more business cards than I have sold books.
Same.
Like you said. And you never know too. Like I've had people be like, oh, is this on ebook? And then I'm like, yeah. And then like a few days later, I'll see that I made an ebook sale too. So again, so I guess what I'm trying to say is don't pressure yourself, get yourself out there, be cool and relaxed. Not everyone's going to buy your book, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, before we get to the final question, this is a very, very powerful question I wanted to ask. And you kind of may touched on this, is that we are reaching a very high literacy crisis. Illiteracy is rising more than ever when it shouldn't, but it is. And I remember another author I had on the show gave this really powerful reflection of what it is to truly be an author. And he said this: to be an author now, it's not just solely to make money, it's not solely to get reviews or anything. To be an author now is to be the author that gets someone back into reading. Because there are a lot of people that have, stopped reading for a very, very long time. And it's more impactful when you meet a person, let's say at a convention or at an event, who comes up to you and says, your book got me back into reading. That means more than anything in the world. And I would just like to hear your thoughts on this discussion, Gabby, that authors should also view themselves as the harbingers of the written word and push human-driven content, human-driven stories that get people back into reading, regardless of age.
Right. Well, I think every reader has a book. And I think like every book has a reader. There we go.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? So I think if people say they don't read, it's just because they haven't found a good book yet, personally. And so like you said, yeah, like I do think authors, we do bring people back into reading it, and there is no better feeling than when people are like, oh, your book touched me or your book influenced me. Like that personally is my dream, is for someone to say that to me. I had a point with this. I had a point. Hold on. This might need to be edited later. But yeah, like it's not about the sales, it's about who you reach out to. Now, I do think, again, too, the literacy crisis is that, just from what I've seen too, I think we also need to be able to challenge ourselves.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I do think we need to read the harder reads, and we do need to be able to think about that and to think critically too.
Yes.
In between there. So again, there is some balance where it's like, yes, I would love for people to read me, but I also love for people to read Dostoevsky, unironically,
Yes. Absolutely. Very
So
true. Very, very true. Absolutely correct, Gabby. And finally, we arrive at the final question of this incredible author interview. Now, with everything we've talked about and more, at the end of the day, what do you hope people take away from your story as an author? And what word of wisdom would you like to pass on to the next generation of writers and journalists?
yeah. Well, for I guess the story of me for people to take away is that, there's no right way, or maybe this is both advice and the story of me, which is that there's no right way to be an author. It's okay to take your time. Like I took 5 years between writing the first draft of Mike to publishing it. It's okay to be on your own timeline. Don't let the imposter syndrome try to get you down. It's okay if it does, but try to pick yourself back up. So
Absolutely.
that's it. And for journalists, it's probably just hang tough. I lost my job right at the start of 2020. And I think journalism has only kind of, I don't want to say the state of journalism has gotten worse, but again, like so many people were like laid off during the pandemic. So it's like they're taking on even more roles. So again, I just want to say, hang tough. You're doing your best. You got this.
Awesome.
But that can also go for authors too. So.
Very true, Gabby. Very true. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to Gaby Knight for coming back on the show in her first ever solo author interview. Now, Gabby, where can people find you on social media, find your books to purchase, and do you have any upcoming announcements you would like to share?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. My name is Gaby Knight Author, Gaby, Gaby, Knight with a K. You can find my books, Mike in the Middle and All in Your Head, on Amazon, KU, and bookshop.org, and at your local bookstore if you search for it there. And then the only upcoming thing I want to promote is that I do have a giveaway right now for All in Your Head, open to U.S. residents. It is, more details are on my Instagram page, basically, for that. So
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very nice. I will link all that down below in the description of this video, viewers and listeners. Also, if you'd like to see Gabby make her first debut here on the channel, make sure to check out part 1 and part 2 of the Authors Roundtable, which are up on YouTube. I will link them here again for you to go and check out. It was an absolutely fun episode having Gabby, Ray, Tasha, Greg, Hayes, Maxine, and Olivia on the show. And a lot of people enjoyed it. So be on the lookout for more announcements on another Authors Roundtable coming in August. And more details on that will be coming soon. But until next time, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill, signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Again, a huge thank you to Gabby for coming back on the show, telling us her journey. And if you'd like to see her back on the show in an episode of the Writers Hub series, you know what you have to do. Like this video, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, have a wonderful day, everybody. See you all next time.